Maud Station was once a busy junction on the BUCHAN line, the railway that linked Aberdeen with Peterhead and Fraserburgh, the two largest towns in Aberdeenshire. This year, 2015, is the 50th anniversary of the closure of the passenger services on the line, and members of the Great North of Scotland Railway Association have opened the Railway Museum to the public, which is located in the old station buildings. The line lingered on with a freight service until 1979, when it was closed completely, not without opposition, which crumbled when it was found BR had sold the line for scrap prior to announcing the closure. Aberdeenshire Council purchased the trackbed for a nominal sum and developed it as a cycle path and tourist walkway. Today there are moves to reopen the line, but more recent developments to reinstate to the busy commuter town of Ellon are perhaps more feasible. We will also take a step back in the video to 1964 and enjoy a trip on the line a year before closure. Keith Jones is a prominent founding member of the Great North of Scotland Railway Association. Keith, can you tell us a bit about the association, when it was founded and how the museum came into being?
The Great North of Scotland Railway Association was founded in 1964. I think I actually joined in 1965 when I was still at school. At that time, of course, a lot of the local railways were closing, and the idea behind the association was in many ways to try and capture the memories and the recollections of people who worked for the Great North of Scotland Railway. And in 1964, the Great North of Scotland had been defunct for just over 40 years, so there were lots of old chats around memories of the time. And a prominent enthusiast in those days was Sir Malcolm Barton Harvey, the Laird of Dinnet, who had been a British politician and indeed governor of South Australia at one time. So it was a different world in those days, but we were still at the time the end of steam. Most of the branch lines around here were still operating. Over the years, obviously, the association has actually gathered strength. It's built up membership. There's been a lot of new information and new photographs have turned up, surprisingly so after so many years. In my own career I worked in local government, and in the 1990s found myself working for Aberdeenshire Council. Aberdeenshire had inherited Maud Museum from the old Bath and Buchan District Council. Bath and Buchan had received money from the government to landscape the area, and were in a position to upgrade the old station building into a couple of tenanted units, with 2 units available for the museum. They bought quite a number of artefacts at an auction, and a lot of stuff was donated to them. By the early 2000s, Aberdeenshire Council was finding that resources for museums, and particularly museums in rural communities like Maud, were becoming limited, and the museum eventually closed. It was put in mothballs. It's just getting a bit noisy.
Right, see you next time.
Okay, thanks.
Keith, we all know the problems that museums and like institutions have these days. Nigel was explaining how you hope to raise funds through the exhibition of the old prisoner's coach, etc. Lately there's been talk in the press of reinstating or at least doing a study into reinstating the line from Dice to Fraserburgh. It's 50 years this year since the line was closed. A more recent feasible idea was perhaps to reinstate the line as far as Ellen only. Do you ever think this station will see a passenger train again?
That's an interesting question. I travelled on the last train on this line in 1979. In fact, it was arranged by the late Norris Forrest of the association, and we had a couple of coaches attached to the last goods train. Around about the same time, Grampian Region, which was the authority responsible for transport, was looking at future transport plans, and of course the idea, a big idea, was at least to have commuter services from Ellen to Aberdeen. And that's been talked about since the late 1970s, and here we are in 2015 and it is still being talked about. So I can just about see funding for a commuter line with park and ride facilities at Ellen, from Ellen to Dice. But it would be a huge project to extend the line up to Fraserburgh, and I don't see it in my lifetime, or indeed yours, Alan. Can I just go back to what I was saying about the museum? The Great North of Scotland Railway Association, through my intervention, arranged with the old with Aberdeenshire Council to open the station on a one-off basis in round about 2005. And from then on we had annual opening for a few years. Latterly the Friends of Maud have taken over, with Nigel being a very enthusiastic chairman, and now we're running every weekend from April to October. So it's good to be able to maintain the railway tradition. I suspect we won't be around to have the museum and the platform here and trains passing by, unfortunately, but one can always dream.
Nigel, you do a lot of voluntary work at the museum. I believe you've got a number of projects on at the moment, one of which is restoring an unusual old railway vehicle, which I believe is a coach for carrying prisoners. Can you tell us something about it?
It's one of the last prison wagons in PETERHEAD Prison Railway, which at the moment is being restored by Steingate Restorations on the Borders at Hot Whistle. It's 90% finished. We're hoping first, before it comes back here, it will go down to Sheldon or Beamish, so it qualifies for the full grant. That's lottery requirements.
And when you bring it back to Maud, how will it be exhibited in the station?
There's a piece of track that will be laid, and it will be exhibited on railway track, open. It'll have all visual and audio systems in it, so children can partake in the locking up of kids. It will be very much hands-on and not the museum piece. It will be an active display.
The prison railway was unusual in its time, in it it was the only nationalised railway in the States at that time. Can you give us an idea of from where the railway ran and for what purpose?
Well, it ran from the quarry through to the prison down to the harbour, basically. I think it's 4 miles. There's lots of sidings because it was built by the Admiralty, so there's stone crushers, there was cranes, a lot of the infrastructure. It ran as a proper railway with signal boxes and systems, but it was never physically connected to the main systems. The other interesting thing, it ran on what you call flat bottom track with spikes, so it's like something out of the Mile West. And I think it's been dumped under people that say that flat bottom track with spikes was never run very well, but apparently it did.
The other feature, of course, was that I believe it was narrow gauge. I think it was something like 3 foot to 3 foot 3. It was.
What the confusion is, the locos and the wagons are closer to each other than normal. Simple reason, it went through around some severe curves, and it would never be, the wagons would never be on the main line anymore.
Oh, thanks very much for that, Nigel. Now I understand in this building here that we have a relic of Dad's army.
Oh yeah, the next building down, it was an air raid shelter built in 1938-39, which was quite common. Those built all over Britain. Same design, different lengths, different materials. Why they built in the middle of the railway station beggars belief. And I don't know if it was ever used in anger, maybe it was. And it was bricked up in 1994, and I thought when we got a grant to get it unbricked it had been whitewashed on the railway or something inside, but no, and it's original, shall we say, vintage 80-year-old brickwork or stonework inside. We're hoping, well, we have got the sound system in at the moment. Once we get the power down, we'll have a lighting system in there so you can scare the kids properly. And there'll be a small exhibition on the other side of it, in the other room, where there'll be ARP helmets, Dad's Army stuff, big victory posters, and all that sort of thing. And then we'll get the schools in, and then we can start making money.
Thanks. I'm very pleased to hear that there is going to be sources of funds coming into the museum. I know it's very difficult times for establishments like this. Can we just, as a final, hear the wail of the World War II siren?
Yeah, if you like to follow through. Take the stick out, but
It's certainly very dark in here.
it's a radio, you see, if the stick's not. There we go.
Dive for cover.
Dive for cover, into the dark hole there. Thanks to modern electronics. Get the whole village out of the streets.
Well, we all hope that's never a sound that we'll never hear again in reality.
Yeah, I hope it's never used. But the interesting thing is, we just had some children in, and they're gobsmackers, little gobsmackers there, transfixed to the seat nearly. So when we get the lights in and the exhibition that side and all this, we've got a very good guy who does all this. It will be an asset back to the museum. It's not railway related, but it's interest. You have to diversify now.
Nigel, thank you very much.
Okay.